Welcome to the Gaudium et Spes podcast, where every other week we bring you Catholic teachings and stories of faith from people throughout the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. Now, here are your hosts, Susanne McNinch and Chez Filippini.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gaudium et Spes podcast. Chez and I are back in the studio, but if you haven't already, please check out our last episode where Bishop Walk concluded a three-part series on the apostles. It was a great series, so please, if you haven't already, go look at those. But Chez and I have the pleasure of being in studio today and having Sister Susan Francis with us. Sister Susan, great to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great. Well, Sister Susan is with the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and she's here doing campus ministry and many other things within our diocese. And we're going to find out a little bit more about all of that here in just a little bit.
That's right. If you're watching, you recognize the uniform, probably. The apostles are, well, we'll say legendary in our diocese. But Sister Susan, you are the newest apostle in our diocese, so thank you you've been here 6 months now?
3.5.
3.5.
Racking it up.
It doesn't, I'm not to say it feels like you've been here forever, but you're already at home, obviously, and the apostles are such a staple of our diocese. So thank you for coming. We're going to hear about your vocation story, the work you've done in the past, the mission work you've done, and what you're doing here in the ministry. But we always start out on our podcast, the Gaudium et Spes podcast, named after the great document of Vatican II, with the very first line to hear about your life right now, which goes, "The joys, the hopes, the griefs, and anxieties of the men of this age, especially those who are poor and in any way afflicted. These are the joys, the hopes, the griefs, and anxieties of the followers of Christ." So you're in uniform, and you conspicuously look like a follower of Christ.
It's pretty obvious. There's no denying it.
So what, any joys, hopes, griefs, anxieties lately that come to mind?
Oh, thank you. I'll start with a joy. So I am from a big family of 8 children, and I'm the second oldest, but my youngest brother got married in June, and he and his wife just announced that they're expecting their first baby.
Hey.
So that's exciting for my family, the newest grandchild. So lots of joy there.
Love it.
How many nieces and nephews are you at?
That will make number 18.
Oh, my, wow.
Got to keep track. I keep a list so I can remember their names and their birthdays. Very important.
Yes, it is.
Bishop has coached us on this with his 50 nieces and nephews or something like that.
That's impressive.
And I was recently doing a marriage prep with a couple. He's from a family of 10. She's from a family of 8. And combined, they have over 80 that they try and keep track of. And I'm just like, what?
Yeah, you got to decide early on if you're going to be the one who sends all the birthday cards or just, special occasions, first communions.
That's a good point.
Because once you set a standard, then you forget one. It's worse than if you never started at all.
Consequences of be fruitful and multiply. Very good. Susanne, what's going on in your world?
Yeah, coming off a great Navy win this last weekend versus Army. I think that was a little unexpected from the Army side, but it was nice. It was just, it's a fun rivalry. It's a great game. It reminds me of the holidays and all of our service members that are, deployed or on assignments away from home. And, I was one of them at one time too. And so our hearts and our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who's out there right now. And I just think it's a tremendous thing. I mean, my kids were laughing at me because I was tearing up at all the commercials and all the moments and everything else like that. But it's just, I think, a really beautiful thing. And then at the very end, when they all each participate in one another's singing of the alma mater, I think is just it's just a real coming together kind of moment. Even though there's a rivalry, there's a brotherhood and sisterhood in all of that as well, because when we're out there, we're one team and one fight. So it's great.
At the end of a college football season, where I think, especially in the rivalry week, there was a lot of pushing and fighting in various places. What was the one? There was flag planting all over the place.
Oh, yes.
In the last week. It's cool that this is the one that kind of caps it all off in exactly the same spirit.
I agree.
I didn't watch the game. I was busy, but I was scrolling through social media and saw the national anthem, and you get choked up when you see it. It's pretty, and I'm not the most patriotic man in the whole world, but it's quite a spectacle.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Sure. Oh, thanks.
We're going to not hold it over anyone's head here in the office who might be of an Army background.
Oh, yes, we will. I got a year to gloat, so that's a good thing. So, although that's probably not a very good virtue to say on the air, so sorry. I'll have to.
There's room in this
Holy competition.
Yeah, there you go.
It's not gloating. It's just people being informed of the facts that their team is not as good as your team.
There you go. Well, Chez, what's going on with you?
Oh, man. I had a great, just a fun weekend. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Kevin and Mariah, shout out. You don't listen to this. But in case you are, we're in town. My sister-in-law just graduated from the University of South Alabama with her nurse practitioner's degree, so congratulations, sir. But they came with their 2 kids, our niece and nephew, Haley and Riley, and when you put all 6 of them together, my 4 kids and them, it is quite adorable. And so yesterday, especially filming this today on a Monday, yesterday was my son John Paul's birthday, so it was extra super special having all of his cousins there. Nice. And it's a funny thing watching a kid get excited about certain gifts. John Paul got excited about new shoes. Got excited about an ATM, which actually serves as your own personal automated piggy bank. Oh. He just really likes knowing exactly how much money he has and how much he saved. And then a hat. And that was pretty much
wow.
It's and he enjoyed his other gifts, got some airplane stuff or whatever, but the boy is all business when it comes down to it. And when you see him open certain gifts, you realize, this kid's a little different than I am, at least. But
you can have confidence he'll take care of you in your old age.
That's correct. So, that is exactly it. It's all right, got one. Awesome. Well, Sister, like I said, the apostles, we've had the apostles on our podcast before, actually. We had Sister Margaret and Sister Colleen, actually, when she was visiting for vocations work. And we heard a little bit about them, and of course, the apostles' work is well known throughout our diocese, both Tallahassee and Pensacola. But you're the newest one here. So before we get into your whole story and everything, how'd you end up here in Pensacola?
That is a great question. We always say it has to be the work of God and the Holy Spirit that I would be here in Pensacola in 2024. And on a little personal note, I found it very consoling that God chose this time to have me come, because I grew up in Texas, which is warm weather, and I have been living most recently in Connecticut, which is a little cooler on the average temperature scale. And I'd been hearing more and more people in Connecticut who go to Florida for vacations and are moving down here and they retire, and I had never been in the state of Florida. All of my life, I feel like I'm pretty well traveled. I've lived in many states, some other countries, but I had never even been in the state of Florida, not even on a layover on an airplane.
That's almost impossible.
I really was starting to feel like something was fundamentally wrong in my life. And so in the 2023, January 1st, I made a New Year's resolution that I would at least visit Florida in 2023. And I did my best. I volunteered to come down and help the sisters here who have been living here in Pensacola. That didn't work out. I made a plane trip somewhere I was flying with a layover in Tampa. That flight was canceled. And so eventually it came to be 2024, and I had never been in Florida. And I thought, well, God, guess that wasn't what you wanted for me. And then 2 months later, in February, I got a call from our sister in charge of the United States, who we call our provincial superior. She's the mother superior of the province of the United States of our congregation of sisters. And she asked me, would you like to move to Florida? I thought, well, that's funny. Yes. She said, you can think about it. I said, oh, well, I already thought about it, and I'd love to move to Florida. So that was God's way, I think, of giving me my heart's wish in a small way. But I was invited down here by Father Raymond Herard, who is the director of Catholic Campus Ministries up at Nativity of Our Lord Parish, where he works with the students from University of West Florida and Pensacola State College. And he had on his heart to have a sister join their ministry. Himself and Katie Johnson have been working with the students. And so he reached out to the apostles of the Sacred Heart, our congregation, to ask if anyone was available. And I guess the Lord chose me. So I'm happy to be down here and enjoying Florida in December when the sun is shining, and I think it's going to hit 70 today. I'm just very, very enjoying it.
Awesome.
That's great. And we'll hear a little bit more about exactly what you're doing down here. But let's kind of backtrack a little bit. So you're from Texas.
Yes.
Born and raised.
Yes.
Come from a large family. So tell us a little bit more about your upbringing and where you came from.
Sure. So yes, I'm a first-generation Texan. In Texas, we're very proud of our state heritage. Sometimes other people remind us that it's also maybe not a virtue how proud we are, but, we believe it's just sharing the good news of Texas. So my parents both are from Wisconsin, but moved to Texas after they got married for the job market really was growing so much there. And interestingly, Dallas area is where they moved to and where I was born and grew up. Almost all of my friends, my peers growing up, also had parents who had moved there for jobs, either from the Midwest, the Rust Belt, or the East Coast, or, of course, from other countries, because there's many immigrants coming into Texas, too. So I grew up with this idea that part of adulthood was moving to a new city or a new place, I think, because that was the adult models I had in my life for people who had moved to establish their families into the area where I grew up. And when I was small, in the 80s, 90s, I'd say Catholics were still pretty much the minority. I grew up right between the Dallas Diocese and the Fort Worth Diocese, so we went to parishes in both dioceses, but all of my schooling was in the Dallas Diocese. But often I would be questioned about my faith by even my friends as a kid, playing in the neighborhood. Most of my friends were other Protestant denominations, Baptists, who really loved the Lord and loved to talk about their faith and were very curious about Catholics. So I feel like growing up, I had an early opportunity to own my faith because it wasn't something that was just taken for granted. I did go to a Catholic grade school through 8th grade and then went to a public high school. But just because most of my peers, anytime we were out in the community as a family, there was even the fact that we had a large family. I'm one of 8 children, as I mentioned. Often the question would be, are you Catholic or Mormon? Because I guess in that area, the only people who had large families were Catholics or Mormons. And so when they say, oh, yeah, it's Catholic, they say, oh, we thought so. So it was really, from an early age, being Catholic was a central part of my life and something that I was proud of. And I'm very grateful to my parents who really took that faith formation seriously in our home. We went to a Catholic school, but so much of the faith formation happened at home, little things. We'd pray a decade of the rosary together at night, even if, the toddler was jumping up and down off the couch while we were doing it. And yes, we lit candles, which sometimes caused needs to call the fire department because he knocked over their candle. But even little things of decorating for Advent or talking about Christmas and baby Jesus, to just having a sense of God in our life from a really young age, that I know formed me so much to be able to have a relationship with God, that I can't really say there was one point where I felt God come into my life. I'm blessed to say, really, as long as I can remember, there was that sense of God being present and active. So that's the beginnings of my life. And then after high school, I was really interested in the medical field, which, again, I really believe God calls us to our professions as much as to our vocations. And nobody in my family had been in the medical field, but being part of a big family, we made many trips to the emergency room and, of course, to the labor and delivery section of the hospital when my younger brothers and sisters were born. So I felt that just that exposure to the medical profession really interested me, and I wanted to be part of that. So even though being raised in this Catholic environment, I have an uncle who's a priest, but he spent most of my life in Italy. He taught at a Holy Cross College in Rome. He's a order priest with the Holy Cross, not the same one as Bishop Walk, but the one that serves the Opus Dei community. So I always forget their official name. So I hope he's not listening to this podcast, because now he's in Washington, D.C., so he might actually listen. But there was this sense of God calls some people to be priests, and God must call some people to be sisters. But honestly, I had no exposure to women religious growing up. There was one order that I was aware of in the area, but I had really little contact with them, the Sisters of the Holy Family. And then I knew about cloistered nuns from, reading the lives of the saints, St. Therese, and the nuns who stayed in the monastery. And I just had no personal interaction with women religious. So honestly, I felt that I discerned my vocation by saying, should I be a sister? No, obviously not, because I want to be out in the world. That was my feeling. And even to the point of when I was confirmed, at the time it was 8th grade, was confirmation in the Dallas Diocese. I made an extra effort to find a confirmation saint who was not a nun. Because I said, what's with all these saints being
Slim
nuns?
pickings.
That's right. I said, I want to be a holy person and not be a nun. So I chose Saint Anne, the grandmother of Jesus. So I figure she probably had something to do with setting me up down the road and making sure the man that I found in my life was Jesus. Because I don't know if you're familiar with that little saying, Saint Anne, find me a man as fast as you can.
No, I had
That's
not heard
brilliant,
that. But Saint Anne is my confirmation saint too. But no, I didn't know that. Goodness.
Yeah, she's the patron saint of finding a good husband.
Oh, well, I found a good one, so I guess she did me well.
She watched out for you, yeah.
She did. And you too.
And me too. I should have
Absolutely.
seen it coming, but I didn't.
This is part of the Catholic culture that you love, right? We have our lost and found saint, St. Anthony of Padua.
Yes.
We have our Blessed Virgin Mary, please find me a parking space, whatever saying that. Guys, what is that? Oh, I can't remember.
Mary, full of grace, please
help me find a parking space. And now this one, this is I have not heard. I cannot believe I've not heard the St. Anne before. That's brilliant. Continue anyhow. It's fat. I just wanted to point out, Sister, in the South, we this visibility factor of religious. We see our priests, and so we know that's an option. The gentlemen out there know. But the visibility factor is a huge part of people not kind of constantly wrestling with it, I feel a lot of time. Remember my grandmother's from southern Germany, Bavaria, same part Pope Benedict is from. And she got married, had my mother, obviously. But I remember talking to her in the car one time, and she was like, oh, when I was a little girl, I dreamt about being a nun. I was like, really? You? At that time, she was like a once in a while mass goer. And I was like, why Oma? And she was like, I just saw them all the time and I think they look pretty in their dresses. And I was like, that's it. But it was just that visibility factor just sparked that sort of part of her imagination. So anyhow, that's just an interesting thing to contemplate.
It's definitely true. I know even some of our older sisters went through school and had apostles as teachers. And they say, again, it was almost automatic. When did I hear God call me? I just always wanted to be what I saw represented around me. But today, for most young people, I think that's not the case. And more often we have misunderstandings of what religious life is, which I did. I really believed that religious life was for people who were afraid of engaging the world and so retreated from the world to focus on God because they would be afraid of losing their faith if they stayed in the world. And that concept, which is totally wrong about what religious life is, did not appeal to me at all. I was very drawn to engaging the world, and I found God's presence very much there. So it was very easy for me to write off a religious vocation as a young person, I'd say, in high school, because I just didn't see any of my own qualities or gifts matching what I understood religious life to be. And there was really nobody around to correct me because I don't think anyone in my life really had a lot of experience with women religious at that time.
So what then did draw you to it? I mean, was there a moment or was it over time? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I really credit my college experience. So I went to college in Omaha, Nebraska, at Creighton University, a Jesuit school. Specifically interested in their pharmacy program because I was decided that pharmacy was the best way for me to use my medical interest in life and also be hopefully one day a wife and mother, because pharmacy is a little less education than medical doctors, and hopefully more flexible schedules. So this was really my life plan, was go to pharmacy school, get married. And I was always interested in mission work, too. That from an early age, again, I just feel like God put that on my heart, that I was always very aware of the suffering and needs happening in other parts of the world. I think growing up in the 90s, the AIDS epidemic was very much publicized, and with the new medications finally being made available, somehow I just became really interested in that movement and saw that in pharmacy with the medications, you could do a lot of good in underserved areas. So I was looking at doing volunteer work with Catholic Medical Missions Board, which anyone out there who's in healthcare, I encourage you to look into. It's a great international aid for healthcare professionals. So this was always on my mind, but going to a Catholic college, I did not expect to be so impacted by the witness of the Jesuit priests who were on campus. And to this day, there's a good number of Jesuit priests who live and work on the campus. That's something they've made a dedicated effort to. I was blessed to go back to Creighton in March of last year for a visit and still see the Jesuit community there so present. At the time when I was in school, they actually had a chaplain living in each of the residence halls for the students, and we had a chapel in each residence hall, which was really impactful for me because it gave me the opportunity to grow my faith right where I was living. And God blessed me with some really good friends, too, just, roommates randomly assigned there. I teased my roommate. We're still in touch. She was ROTC in College Army, and she wasn't enjoying her experience of the early mornings and the, physical training exercises. And so I made her deal that when she would have to get up early and go out training, I'd get up early and go to Mass and pray for her.
Okay.
So by proxy, she was helping me along in my faith without realizing it. I think I got the better end of the deal because the chapel was heated, and she was outside in the snow in Omaha, whatever they had to do. She did try to convince me to join the Army later when she decided she loved it. She's still in. She's career Army now. But I decided that wasn't for me. So I also had the opportunity to study abroad when I was in undergrad, and I went to southern France specifically because of the connection with the mission work. There's a group based out of southern France called Pharmacists Without Borders, similar to Doctors Without Borders. But they have a warehouse there where they're able to collect unused medication and then repackage it for underserved areas. So I went to that part of France to volunteer with the Pharmacists Without Borders and to study French as a second language. They had a state university there for people learning French. Because of my desires to serve in Africa, I knew that English was the main language in some countries and French was another common official language across the African continent. So that experience in Europe, I feel like really gave me a different perspective of faith, because I had been so blessed in my life to be surrounded always by people of faith, whether they were Catholic or Christian or even Muslim. One of my good friends in high school was Muslim, but very intent on being faithful to her religion and her God. But my experience in southern France at that time was the opposite, where I think every single person I met had no faith life and were baffled by my interest in even attending Mass on Sundays. I really can't say there was hostility that I experienced, but just really surprise and sort of confusion over why faith would even be important to a young person.
France.
Yeah.
The land of Joan of Arc,
Exactly.
King St. Louis IX.
Yeah.
You're telling me they're all just like,
Well,
faith is irrelevant.
I try
This
to
is
be
a leading question, obviously.
Yes, I try to be gentle in my judgments, because I was only there one semester in one small area. But I've heard it again and again, as I think many of us have, that Europe was the cradle of Christendom, so to speak. Of course, the Middle East is where Jesus was born, but the faith is no longer as strong there as it was. And for me, that was really just shocking and gave me an opportunity to sort of evaluate, why did I care so much about God, and what would my life look like if I didn't have God in it? And for me, it was just so clear that my life would be worse without God, and that I would be less happy. So that experience kind of clarified, I think, my priorities, that I had always kept faith as important, but without really acknowledging it. And so when I came back to the States to continue at Creighton in the pharmacy program, I just couldn't shake this feeling that something was missing in my life. And that was really unsettling. I was dating somebody at that time, and I was in the pharmacy program. My life dream, I was working in a pharmacy. I was living with several really solid roommates who were just wonderful people. And yet to say something's missing in my life was really disorienting and kind of scary, honestly, because this was all I ever wanted, and I had it, and it's not good enough.
Right.
And I didn't know what that feeling was about, quite honestly. So I kept doing what I was doing, kept studying, kept working, kept up my relationships, but finally got this sense in prayer, because again, I was very grateful that the atmosphere that I was in led me to have a regular prayer life, that God was asking me to do something different than I was doing. And again, that was just scary. That was not joy. That was not freedom at this point. It was just very, very scary. And it took a lot of prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. Again, on campus, I'm very grateful for that opportunity I had. In between class, I could go and pray. And before I could finally say to God, okay, what you want, not what I want.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was able to say those words that I felt joy and freedom. Wow. It really was within minutes of me praying that prayer, okay, Lord, your will, not my will for my life. Even if that means giving up my dreams. I didn't really know yet what God was asking, but I had this definite sense that God was asking me to give up my life plan, which was a very detailed plan, because I was a planner person. I had it all, spelled out. And I was able to say, okay, God, your plan, not mine. And the time it took me to walk out of that church, I was suddenly filled with joy and a desire for religious life, which surprised me because I really had no exposure to it at that point. And I thought, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. Okay, now what? I don't know anything about nuns. So that you could turn to Google, because Google has all the answers, even in, this was year 2004, I think, or 5 maybe, 2005. So Google still had a lot of answers then. And I did Google how to become a nun. And then, wouldn't you know, there is an online site for people who want to learn more about being sisters. It's kind of like CatholicMatch.com, but it's for religious life. It's called vocationnetwork.org. Nice. Check it out. You fill out your information, make a profile, all of that, and then your information is sent to different orders. And then these orders can contact you. And in the United States alone, we have over 600 different religious congregations.
Wow.
So I started getting a lot of mail. And if you've done the college process of, applying to different colleges, you can have a similar experience where suddenly you're just inundated. So that was really overwhelming. I kind of took a step back and said, wait a minute, I don't know what I'm doing. But I was able to start contacting the different orders and visiting them. And then just really felt connected to the apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus because of our motto, which is the love of Christ urges us on. So that idea that we are motivated by loving God, and that's what we want to share with everyone that we meet, very much going out to the people. And we're an order present in over 15 countries, so a big sense of going out to the world really attracted me. So amazing. God's grace, and I was able to join the order in 2006, and I'm still here. Heck yeah.
Speaking of the love of Christ, The Exorcist has ruined this, unfortunately, but it pushes it outward. You did eventually, in your work as a religious sister, get to go. You were truly pushed out into the dream scenario, or at least one of the desires you had beforehand to do missionary work in West Africa, right? So, can you tell us about that? Maybe as a hallmark for, not hallmark as in like the card company, but one of your high points in serving missionary work.
Yes. So again, God fulfills, I believe, the desires of our hearts always, just sometimes in different ways than we expected. So after joining the sisters, I went back to school for nursing, and because the sisters felt that was more versatile in reaching people in need than pharmacy, and then was ultimately able to go to our mission in West Africa in the country of Benin. I went there in 2017 and worked in a public hospital there where our sisters served, and then in our own clinic, which our congregation owns there in the southern part of the country, which is a French-speaking country. So again, God was using that effort I had made to be prepared. And that was not let down in my desire to be with the African people. I really enjoy the spirit of their culture, their outgoing personality, their dance. So I did a lot of dancing there, singing, and was able to use those skills of nursing and the French language to really connect with a lot of people there. I was there for 4 years. And still keep in touch with people thanks to WhatsApp, the great, social media app that's free. So in Africa, in my experience in Benin, everyone has a cell phone. They say they skipped a generation of technology there. They never had landline phones, but went right to the cell phone. So that's great. We could still keep in touch. But the church is really alive and growing in that part of the world too, which is so hopeful. Parishes are being opened all the time. Seminaries are full. Again, that sense of the faith being new. It's only been 150 years of the Catholic Church's presence in Benin, but a lot of people coming to the faith, asking for the sacraments, and seeing the good news of Christ as something desirable and exciting. So it gives a lot of hope to me for the future of our church, for sure.
Beautiful. Well, for those of us, that are living here in Pensacola, kind of tell us, what is your day-to-day life like? I mean, what sort of things are you involved with and engaged with, and how can we see you about town?
Let's see. Today I'm at the Pastoral Center. So I do... what I came here for was to work with the college students, which Nativity of Our Lord Parish graciously hosts that ministry up near UWF. So when it's not Christmas break, like it is right now, the students have their activities on Sunday evenings. We have a student mass and then a gathering afterward. Wednesday evenings are our faith night weekly, where we'll have a speaker, a topic, and a meal together. We hold a women's group twice a month, adoration at the parish and also on campus. And then myself, Father Raymond, and Katie Johnson are available there to meet one-on-one with the students based on their schedule. We work around the students' schedules, just try to be a spiritual guide. One student said, I realize my parents aren't here anymore and I still need spiritual guidance. So it's been again, a hope-filled experience to see young people interested in their faith and taking the spiritual life seriously, granted amid their many other concerns, including their jobs and their school. So sometimes maybe it doesn't look as consistent as we would like, but to see that there is the desire that keeps them coming back, and when they invite their friends, it's just really a hopeful experience overall, I'd say, even that the diocese is willing to invest in that ministry. And then I'm also able to keep up with the nursing on the side. I'm doing some home care visits through Covenant Care here in town. Okay. Yeah. So going into people's homes, learning all about Pensacola, the different streets and zip codes, and getting to really be with the people and hearing some really good stories while providing care. So that's been a blessing too.
Nice.
Well, what a cool, your story, especially the decisiveness of college as a place of discernment and encountering God and making decisions and making an act of the will to turn your life over to God. College is the new arena for that for most people, so it's such a blessing to have you to be able to talk students through that, even if they're not thinking about religious life, but just as a decisive moment for following God in a real way. So I'm assuming you're having those conversations every once in a while where somebody comes up to you and is like, what do I do with my life, sister, or something like that?
Yes. Yeah. And honestly, one thing I like to say a lot to college students, there's a lot of anxiety I feel about people making the wrong choice. Mm-hmm. People who are serious about serving God a lot of times will say, well, what if I make the wrong choice? What if I don't know what God's actually calling me to? And I firmly believe that God leads us, and that if you don't know where God is calling you, then you're not making the wrong choice, because God hasn't revealed it yet to you. And even if maybe what you choose to do today isn't exactly what God had in mind, God can work with us in every step of the way. So I just like to encourage them that there doesn't need to be anxiety about making the wrong vocation choice.
I think that's great advice.
That's incredible advice.
It really is.
Yeah.
As a mom of two that are going through similar things, I think I'm going to put that little piece of gold nugget in my tool belt, and I'm going to use that with them next time we have a good conversation. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's just, there's a way in which I think that anxiety pervades a lot of people, but like I said, God is not somebody who's like, you better figure it out. Your life's going to be awful, and I'm never going to be with you ever again. It's like, no, he's going to, and whatever that decision is, he'll probably incur a little bit of pain and wrestling and hard moments, but it's part of the gig of being Christian.
It is. So, beautiful Advent season right now. So, Sister, as we conclude this podcast here, what are your plans for Christmas and into the new year, and any kind of words of advice for all of us here listening?
Thank you. Yes. So Christmas will be here in Pensacola, my first Pensacola Christmas at the convent. Myself and the other 3 apostles, we live there, are hosting some of the area priests and seminarians. Mm-hmm. So that's a good time. I don't have to do too much cooking because the other sisters are experts. So yes, going forward into the new year, I would just encourage everyone listening to really spend that time listening to God in your life, whether it's 5 minutes or as much time as you have in a day, but to make a commitment, whether it's in your car. That's one of my favorite places to choose quiet. And let the Lord know that you believe in God's love for you, because I believe that's what God wants most for each of us, is to let us be loved. God wants to love us. And when we acknowledge God's love in our life and believe that it's working every day, I think that's the best way to connect with God, because that's who God is the love reaching out toward us, so that we can just go into this new year confident of God's love for us.
Beautiful.
I'll take it. This was like a little mini retreat for Advent for me, this conversation.
Exactly.
Like, oh yeah, this is what life's all about. Sister, thank you so much. This has been such an incredible conversation. Thank you for your witness. Thank you so much for your presence here. Long may it continue.
Thank you.
And yeah, what a joy to have you around. We, guys, speaking of the new year, our next episode is particularly focused on the new year, as it usually is, but next year is a special year. It is the Jubilee year. So the Pope Francis has declared 2025 a Jubilee year, as many popes have done in the past. And Bishop Walk in our next episode is going to explain exactly what that means. What is Jubilee year? How can we participate from afar here in our diocese, or even if we're up for it, maybe making a pilgrimage over to Rome, enjoying the spirit of the Jubilee year. So we'll see you back here for that episode in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Gaudium et Spes podcast. If you would like to know more about our podcast, please visit our website, gaudiumετspes.net, or go to ptdiocese.org and click the button that says podcast. If you listen to the audio version from an app such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, be sure to rate, review, and comment. If you watched us on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe or leave us a comment there as well. Thank you for joining us.